Hello, everyone. It's Diana.
I'm Nick.
And this is Team RCIA. It's Tuesday. That means we are talking RCIA every day, especially on Tuesdays.
So we want to talk in this live. We want to talk about what happens if one of your catechumens missed the rite of election. Most of our parishes celebrated the rite of election last Sunday, and I'm guessing that not every single catechumen who is supposed to show up in the world showed up.
Yes, because pandemic, because
Time has no meaning.
climate, because snowpocalypse, because all of those really good reasons. So what do you do? Can you just skip the rite of election? Can you just, I don't know, what can you do? Is it optional? And same thing, same question for children. Is it optional for children catechumens? So we're going to look at some of those things here.
Yeah, well, first of all, the rite of election is not optional. It's super, super important. The rite says that it's the it's the focus of all of our concern for the catechumens. So that actually, from before the time they're catechumens, when we first meet them and they're inquirers, we are our goal is to get them to the rite of election, because the rite of election is the decision point. It's where they publicly say, yes, I want to be initiated, and the bishop or his delegated minister publicly says that the church is with you, we support you, we know God has chosen you, and we promise you you're going to be initiated at the next Easter Vigil.
So it's not just a throwaway ritual. It really is a significant, substantial rite itself, and is required for catechumens in order to move into the next phase of their journey, the period of purification and enlightenment. And so normally this ritual takes place at the local cathedral with the bishop, because it is that important. The bishop is the normative celebrant of the rite of election. But in usual cases, either in any time of year or any year, as well as in time of pandemic, the bishop can delegate another person to be the celebrant on his behalf of the rite of election. And so this year, many dioceses did that, where their bishops gave their pastors permission to celebrate the rite of election in their own parish, with the pastor presiding on behalf of the bishop. And so maybe you did that this year. So if your catechumen missed the diocesan rite of election with your bishop, you could still celebrate, and you should still celebrate it in your own parish. So the way you would do that is contact your local bishop and ask for permission, and give the names of the people who would be celebrating and the reasons why they would need to celebrate this. Right?
Or even if your pastor's already gotten permission and you had the rite of election in your parish last Sunday, and one of the catechumens missed it for some reason, you can schedule another rite of election. You could do it at this coming Sunday liturgy, the second Sunday of Lent, or you could do it at a weekday Mass anytime this week, or you could do it at a Liturgy of the Word service that you might schedule in the evening, and celebrate it that way. It
Yes.
doesn't necessarily have to happen in the context of Mass.
Yes. So those are some things about that. We get the same question about children. And it is a little confusing, because the ritual text, always have to do this, the rite of Christian initiation of adults, make sure you have a copy of the ritual text itself. In the section on children, it says optional in the header for rite of election. And we start thinking, oh, I guess children don't have to go to the rite of election. But there's a nuance to that optionality here.
Yeah, it's really what's optional is to celebrate the adaptations for children. But the actual rite itself is not optional. So you'd celebrate either the adult rite with the children, or optionally you could celebrate the adapted rite for children. we don't recommend that you use the adaptive rite for children. It's not. I think it's not as strong and not as clear as the adult rite. And in the Diocese of San Jose for decades, we the child catechumens have come to the regular rite of election with the adults, and they love it. They get a lot out of it. It's a very beautiful liturgy. Now this year in the Diocese of San Jose, everyone celebrated in their parishes, like Diana mentioned. And so I don't really know how the children were incorporated or if they were incorporated, but they should have been, and that should be the case in your parish as well. They should be incorporated into the usual rite of election that you celebrated last week, or if you have to do a makeup celebration, then they would be in that celebration this coming week.
Mm-hmm. And so, bottom line, in terms of the rite of election, if a catechumen who is ready for the sacraments misses a rite of election, we need to figure out some way to celebrate that ritual with them. And it could take place in different ways, different settings, but it is that important and required in order to do that. And it should be done within the next week or so, because there are several more rituals that are coming up that are part of the conversion process for our elect.
Now, with pandemia, there's a question about how, especially if we have like more than a few catechumens. I would assume if somebody missed in your parish, it's probably like one person, and so it's probably safe enough to have them sign the book of the elect. But in some places, if there are several, maybe you don't want to have several people walking up to the book and signing. And so there is an option in the rite for the catechumen to stay in their place 6 feet apart from everybody and call out their name, and then a minister would write down the name in the book of the elect as the catechumen calls out his or her name.
Yes, and so that act of enrollment is also a required part of the rite. You can't omit that symbolic action, because the rite itself, the rite of election, has another name. It's called enrollment of names, and so some visual way of signaling that a name is being given, whether it's written down or spoken out loud, and then received, whether it is presented in a book or written down by another minister. That action itself is an integral part of the rite of election.
And this is a little tip maybe for next year. If your parishes go back to celebrating the rite at the cathedral, in most of our parishes, in that case, we have a rite of sending in the parish. And again, this is optional, but in our diocese in San Jose, it's at that rite of sending in the parish where the catechumens sign their name in the book, and then that book is taken to the cathedral and is part of the liturgy of the actual rite of election at the cathedral, and so the books are all presented to the bishop. Now, in other dioceses, the actual signing happens at the cathedral, and I've never actually participated in one of those, so I'm not quite sure how that works if you have catechumens from all over the diocese signing, but I'm told it's very beautiful in places where they do it. But one suggestion I would make is, if like this coming Sunday, for example, if you're going to have a catechumen who missed the rite of election, and you're going to celebrate one this coming Sunday, and they're going to sign the book of the elect, once they sign the book, you can sort of hold that book up and maybe even present it or process it or show it to the members of the assembly to again emphasize the big dealness of them enrolling in this period. It's not, the book of the elect is a little bit metaphorical. It's a metaphor for the names that God has written on his hand. But even so, our symbols speak when we treat them with dignity and reverence, and we kind of build them up and amplify them.
So one other question that we often get sometimes around this time of year is what happens if a person has been elected, went through the rite of election, but for whatever reason never actually got baptized at that Easter vigil? Do they have to go through the rite of election again? And we can think a little bit about what these rituals do. And these rituals, especially the rite of acceptance, the rite of election, and the celebration of the sacraments, change a person's identity. And because of that change, they're really one time
Yeah.
celebrations. You can't celebrate the rite of acceptance again if you're already a catechumen, because the purpose of that is to make you a catechumen. You can't really celebrate the rite of election again because the purpose of that is to enroll you into
Your name's already
the,
enrolled.
yes. So there, really, you wouldn't require a catechumen who has already been made an elect to celebrate the rite of election again if they delayed their baptism. But
You,
it could be a spiritual part of their growth if maybe at the last moment they had some questions and doubts, and that's the reason that they delayed their initiation. It could be a spiritual benefit for them to participate in the rite of election again, but not necessarily be enrolled
yeah,
because they're already
they
enrolled.
would be as members of the assembly,
Yeah.
like you and I would participate in a sense. Or another, along with that, or instead of, you could also do like a retreat experience around the first Sunday of Lent for them to recall, do like a mystical reflection on the rite of election that they celebrated a year ago, and and uh, and maybe even have some bring the book of the elect where their name is in it,
Mm-hmm.
and do some ritual showing again of the book with their name, and make a big deal out of the naming. And you can really, there are three questions that, is it three or two,
Three.
three questions that the bishop asks of the godparents in the rite of election. So you could, in the retreat experience, you could ask the godparents those questions again, or you could ask the candidate, the catechumen, those questions directly, and ask, what's different this year from last year about those questions for you. So make it a real kind of opening up of the rite of election for them, that they won't be celebrating again this year, but you can still emphasize it.
So those are just a couple of sort of extraordinary circumstances that seem to come up more ordinarily these days when everything seems extraordinary in our lives. But
I think we're getting more questions than usual because it's unusual times. So the pandemic has caused the rite of election to be celebrated in a lot of our parishes. A lot of us who never had to worry about planning the rite of election, that was all done at the diocesan office, now have questions because of the reduction of staff in our diocesan offices. A lot of people who had expertise in doing this are no longer there, and so people who've never done it before are planning it, and it's a very, very difficult time. But the Holy Spirit never gives us more than we can handle. So if we just take a breath and pray about it, read the rite, talk to sources you trust, we hope that we're a source that you can turn to. Plus, there's other people in your diocese that you can turn to, and just ask questions, and not just about the rite of election, but anything with the rites as they're coming up. Don't this is I guess this is what I would suggest we all not do, is not just forego something because it's difficult. It's hard now because we're in pandemic time, or somebody missed it, and it's gonna upset the apple cart if we have to go back and figure out what to do with this person. It's easier just to go forward and ignore it. And I would say, let's not do that. Let's do what Jesus always did. Jesus went the extra mile. He reached out to the extra person. Even when he was tired and tried to get away where he could rest and people would come and find him, he'd find the strength to step up once more and do the hard work that the Father calls us to do. And so I'd suggest we all follow that model more than trying to make things a little bit easier for us. I'm all for making things easier when we can, but let's not do it at the sake of the ritual process for the catechumens and candidates.
but we all know you guys are doing an
Yes.
amazing job
Yes.
this past year, and to get your catechumens to this moment of the period of purification and enlightenment really has been a work of the Holy Spirit working through you.
Yeah.
So we're grateful for that.
Absolutely.
We want to give you two further opportunities to continue to grow in this ministry and to be with other people who worry about the same things that you do. Because it's always better to worry with others than to worry alone, huh? Next, is it next week? Or no, 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now, first week of March, March 4. We're having one of our free community chats, and I'll put the link to register for that in the comments box here. At this next one, we're talking about the sacraments of initiation in pandemia, in the time of pandemic, because surely more and more people will have the vaccine hopefully by then, but we're still going to be restricted in many ways. And so, what can we do to celebrate the sacrament of baptism, confirmation, and the Eucharist as fully as we can with our elect, and to help them begin this part of their process of faith uh, among the faithful. So, we're going to talk about that. And then the second thing that I want to share with you is a free handout on the scrutinies. This, you want to say a little something about the scrutinies?
Yeah, so the scrutinies are the preparation for initiation. This period of purification and enlightenment. The formation or the catechesis that happens is primarily spiritual and liturgical. And so these three scrutinies that happen on the third, fourth, and fifth Sundays of Lent are the moment when the church sort of does a strong bucking up, a strong infusion of the Spirit for these elect who are going to be baptized in just a few weeks. And so it's a very strong, important prayer. It's a prayer of protection against temptation, against evil. It's a prayer of strengthening of all the goodness that we have discovered in these wonderful human beings over the time we've walked with them on this journey. It's a promise that Christ will be with them in any struggles they have now and in the future. Given the power of these prayers, the rites, the three scrutiny rites themselves are very simple, but they are very profound. And so again, we don't want to skip these. We had to skip them last year, some of them anyway, because of pandemic. Now we know a little bit how to deal with things safely. Most of our churches are open at least for small groups. And so we need to celebrate these rites and celebrate them safely. They can't be done online through the airwaves. They have to be done in person. But those of us, if we're limited in the number of people can actually show up, the rest of the parish can participate via live stream while the elect are actually celebrating the scrutiny in the church.
And so check out the handout there in the comments box on the history of the scrutinies and three things that you might want to know about them as RCI ministers, as liturgical planners for that. And just a hint, the scrutinies are also required. You can't bypass them. And if you do need to, you have to ask permission from your bishop. So it's that important. But join us at our next community chat on March 4. It's free. Bring your friends, bring your favorite beverage to enjoy during the chat itself, and bring your questions and your wisdom and experience and share them with others.
Okay, everyone. Thanks so much for all the great work you're doing. Have a blessed Lent.
We're praying for you. Please pray for us. Thanks.